Story 1. This happened last week, and for some context, I have always lived in the same house in the countryside, with the same neighbors, a wealthy family with 2 daughters who are at least 8 years older than me. When I was a kid, things seemed to be going okay, but over the years, they started to show us less and less respect, often getting into arguments with my parents due to their attitude and noise. They've basically become the worst neighbors you can imagine. I don't recall exactly when, but around the time I was 8 years old, they even stopped acknowledging me. They wouldn't say hello or respond when I greeted them, which really hurt me at the time. Now, we could have reported their behavior whenever they crossed the line, but we knew they had more money and power than us, and if they wanted to cause trouble for our family, they could. One close call happened a few years ago when my father lost his temper with one of the daughters, whom we'll call Julie. She's the entitled person in this story. Julie and I share one passion: horses. Naturally, we ended up at the same riding center, though it surprised me, as I expected her to choose a more prestigious stable. I've been riding there since I was 11, but I hadn't seen her much because we went on different days. At the beginning of 2020, her horse passed away, and she stopped coming. However, she returned in the summer and asked if there was a horse she could buy. I believe she now part owns a lovely mare. Meanwhile, I started working at the stable on weekends and got to know the regular riders and horse owners. The manager knows me well, and he allows me to care for one of his horses as if it were my own. So, I've been going to the stables every day after school, which means I've been seeing Julie quite often. The funny part is that she's spent so many years ignoring me that she no longer knows what I look like. As a result, she hasn't recognized me at all. She just assumes I'm a regular horse girl and not the person who's lived next to her for the past 18 years. I haven't mentioned this to anyone at the stable, as I don't want to cause any drama. What happens at home should stay separate from the riding center. While Julie and I don't really talk, we at least say hi and exchange the usual pleasantries like "have a nice ride," as is customary. But recently, I think she's put the pieces together, because she's started giving me dirty looks at the stables. I honestly have no idea what I've done to her besides exist. For whatever reason, she seems determined to stir up trouble for me and my family. She began bad-mouthing me behind my back. Now, I like to think I'm fairly well liked at the stable and don't have any issues with anyone. A few friends mentioned to me that Julie had been talking about me, so I simply admitted that she was indeed my neighbor and that our families didn't get along. However, I also made it clear that I had no intention of bringing personal problems to the riding center. Unfortunately, Julie doesn't seem to share that view. At first, I tried to ignore her behavior. But then, things escalated. She started talking to my boss, the stable owner, about me. He was the one who told me, although he didn't go into too many details. Apparently, she had been saying things like, "Is she even qualified?" and "she's not very polite," along with, "she's been causing problems with the horse owners," all of which are complete lies. Basically, she was pressuring him to fire me. Thankfully, my boss is not someone who can be easily manipulated. He saw right through her nonsense and told her that if he heard one more bad word about me, he would ban her from the riding center. Story 2. I'm a 17-year-old with a weekend job at a McDonald's near my house. I plan to keep working there after high school because I want to become a nail tech, and I'll need the money to buy my own supplies until I build up my clientele. But that's beside the point. Recently, I had to take a break from work because I was almost working full-time during nights. And when I say late, I mean really late. And with my bad insomnia, the exhaustion was starting to affect me. My grades were slipping, so I decided to take some time off to focus on myself and my schoolwork. Now, I only work weekends, which I honestly prefer because it's usually slower. On my first weekend back, I met a new girl who had just started working. She was at the second window, and I could hear someone yelling. She came over to me with a bag and looked really upset. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that a woman was yelling at her because a few things were missing from her family's order. Now, mistakes happen. There have been times when I've forgotten something in someone's order, and no one's ever yelled at me for it. Usually, they just tell me what's missing, I apologize, and they go on their way. So, I told her to give me what they were missing, and I'd handle it. She seemed relieved. I opened the window and handed the customer the bag, which only had a large fry in it. They then told me they were still missing another fry and a drink. Keep in mind, I was just going off what my coworker said was missing. So, I went to ask what drink and size fry they were missing, but before I could get a word out, the woman started yelling at me and cussing me out. Her, do your job. I have to go to work every day and do mine. Me, I am doing my job, ma'am, if you would just tea. Her, look at your screen, or the receipt. Me, I don't have a receipt. The order has already been. Her, then get one. Are you seriously that slow? That's when my manager came back from the bathroom and overheard what the woman was yelling. She was loud. My manager stormed over, and when I told her what was happening, she was furious. My manager, is there a reason you're yelling at a minor like that? Her, I don't care if she's a minor. This dumb blonde doesn't know how to do her job. My manager, first of all, you're blonde too. Second, you don't speak to a minor like that. Her, you're supposed to serve food. My manager, yeah, and I'm the one who gives it to you. So apologize, and I'll hand it over, or get out of my drive-thru. The woman refused to apologize, so my manager shut the window. Her husband started honking the car horn, and it wasn't until my manager pulled out her phone to call the police that they finally drove off. Later, I found out that the woman came back the next day looking for me. This was in the morning, but I only worked nights, so I wasn't there. However, my manager from the previous night was, along with a general manager. The woman came in yelling all kinds of slurs about me, and even threatened to punch the life out of her. My manager got angry and started yelling back, but the general manager sent her to the office and took over. Here's what my general manager told the woman. My manager, if you're going to yell at, insult, and threaten one of my kids, you're banned from ever coming back here. Get out. Now, I'm not actually her kid, she calls all her minor employees her kids. But when the woman refused to leave again, they called the police. She was officially banned, and honestly, it makes for a pretty interesting story to add to my life. Story 3. One day, a woman in her mid-50s called 911 and claimed she had been robbed at a local store. She frantically said, "Help! I've been robbed and need the police quickly," and then hung up, ignoring all further calls from dispatch trying to reach her. Naturally, when a call like that comes in, the dispatcher issues an urgent alert, and we all drop what we're doing to respond, code 3 lights and sirens. I was in the middle of a traffic stop when the call came over the radio. Since I was only about a mile away, I wrapped up the traffic stop, returned the driver's license, and sped off to the scene. I was the first to arrive, followed by several sheriff's deputies who provided mutual aid, as we're a small department. When we got there, things seemed unusual. Typically, when people need police help urgently, they're waiting at the door before we even stop. But in this case, we had to actively search for the supposed victim. As I approached the store, thinking the woman had gone inside for safety, I spotted a short, blue-haired woman waving at us from the parking lot. "Hey officers, I'm over here," she shouted. A deputy, and I walked over to her, while the others prepared to search the area. One of the deputies even had a K-9 ready in case a track was needed. We approached the woman and asked, "Ma'am, you said you've been robbed. How long ago did it happen? What did they take, and which direction did they go afterward?" She told us it happened about 10 minutes ago, and that the suspect took $300 from her. She also mentioned they were still inside the store. The deputy and I exchanged a look of disbelief. No, they can't be that bold, we thought. Though, some criminals are truly that foolish. Once, I heard about a guy who stole a wallet, then immediately used the victim's bank card to buy beer just across the street. I alerted the other deputies, and we started making plans to search the store. But first, we needed more details. "Ma'am, can you describe the suspect? What were they wearing?" She replied, "Oh, he's wearing a store uniform." It was the manager, Mike. I paused, confused. "Wait, you're telling us the manager came outside, robbed you, and then went back to work?" She snapped. "No, he robbed me inside the store. He wouldn't accept my $300 off coupon for my purchases, so he robbed me of $300. I want him arrested, and I'm going to call his bosses to get him fired. Not that it'll matter after you arrest him anyway." The deputy and I were dumbfounded. We informed the other officers and deputies about the situation and decided on a plan. 2 of us would go inside while another stayed with the victim. The rest resumed their regular patrol duties. I told the woman, "Ma'am, please stay here and give your information to this officer. The deputy and I will head inside and speak to Mike to get his side of the story." She huffed. "What's there to get? You're supposed to believe the victim, not the robber." I ignored the comment and entered the store, where the manager, Mike, was already waiting for us. He assumed we were there for a legitimate robbery in the parking lot and had no idea we were there because of him. When I explained the situation, he facepalmed and said, "Oh my gosh, she actually did it. That woman is out of her mind. We have trouble with her every time she comes in, trying to use fake coupons she finds on Facebook or other random websites. When we tell her they're fake and prove it by scanning the barcodes, she accuses us of not wanting to honor the coupons because we're mad or trying to steal her money. She claims Facebook only gives the coupons to important clients, and every time she threatens to call 911 and report that I robbed her." After talking to Mike further, he told me about her history of causing trouble at the store. She had even been temporarily banned for 6 months. He then directed me to the cashier who had attempted to check her out, and the cashier confirmed the story, mentioning that the woman once tried to use a wanting $500 off coupon she found online. Before leaving, I asked Mike if he wanted her trespassed. With a big smile, he said, "Absolutely." I returned outside, and before I even said anything, I nodded to the deputy, who knew that meant to arrest her. The moment she realized what was happening, she screamed, "What are you arresting me for? He's the one who robbed me. I'm the victim. You don't arrest the victim." She started flailing and resisting, and things escalated when she attempted to back-kick the female deputy between the legs, forgetting that she wasn't dealing with a male officer. She ended up face first on the ground, tasting asphalt. As we carried her to the patrol car, still kicking and screaming, she continued shouting that the police never believe her when she reports being robbed. Once she was in the car, I read her Miranda rights. When I asked if she wanted to talk about what happened, she spat in my face, most of it landing in my eyes. For the entire 20-minute ride to the station, she screeched about how she was the victim, how she was going to sue the store for making false claims, and how both the deputy and I should start applying for jobs at fast food places because she was going to make sure we lost our jobs and everything we owned. She did file a complaint with Internal Affairs and the sheriff, but we were cleared of any wrongdoing. She even tried to sue, but her case was promptly dismissed, and the judge reportedly laughed her out of the courtroom. Side note, while I was at the jail doing paperwork, I searched her name and found that, surprisingly, she had no prior arrests. However, there were at least 6 reports with her listed as the victim in unfounded calls, and several no trespass orders had been issued against her. She was ultimately charged with misuse of the 911 system misdemeanor, filing a false police report misdemeanor, battery on a law enforcement officer felony, battery on an officer with bodily fluids felony, since her spit landed in my eyes. From what the district attorney told me, after she was found guilty at trial, she spent some time in jail. She was also banned from the store for life, and from nearly every other store in the area, as she had caused trouble at all of them. It's been 7 or 8 years now, and I haven't had another call involving her, so I assume she moved on to a different area. Story 4. I work at a restaurant where the employees are overworked and underpaid. But despite this, everyone gets along with each other and the management. The real evils that ruin our day are the customers and our district manager, who sticks rigidly to the rules and occasionally drops by. For about 3 months, someone had been smearing fecal matter all over the handicap stall in the men's bathroom. Sometimes they'd even fling it outside the stall onto another toilet or the wall. Naturally, management sent one of us employees to clean it up. Fortunately for me, I worked the cash register and never had to do it. However, my coworker, Arthur, often got stuck with this task. Arthur, who I describe as the personification of pettiness, had a sharp tongue, a quick temper, and was not one to back down. We got along fine, but management often had him clean the bathroom whenever it was soiled. One day, Arthur came in on his day off to grab some food. After placing his order, he went to use the restroom. While there, he heard someone making a lot of noise while having a bowel movement in the handicap stall. At first, he didn't think much of it, even though the smell was overwhelming. Eventually, a man around 50 years old exited the stall. Arthur, curious, peeked in the stall and saw the mess, the familiar poop smears everywhere. Infuriated, Arthur confronted the man, asking him if he had done that and why. The man, grinning, responded, "Look, I don't care. I just want to ruin some poor person's day." Arthur, realizing he was that poor person, was set off. At first, Arthur wanted to confront the man physically, but as he put it, time seemed to slow down and he saw red. Instead of causing a scene, Arthur washed his hands and sat back down, waiting for his food. He positioned himself where he could watch the man at his booth, happily eating like nothing had happened. Sure enough, someone eventually complained about the mess in the bathroom, and another coworker of Arthur's had to go clean it up. Arthur noticed the man grinning as he watched the situation unfold, and that's when Arthur decided the man needed to learn a lesson. After the man finished his meal and left, Arthur followed him home. For the next few weeks, on both workdays and days off, Arthur trailed the man, learning his routine. He discovered the man's work and sleep schedule, as well as other details of his life. Arthur found that the man lived modestly, with no real backup if something went wrong, and this gave him the foundation for his revenge. First act. Late one night, Arthur went to the man's house and slashed one of his tires. The man drove a Jeep, so Arthur also poked a small hole in the spare tire compartment. The next morning, the man found his tire flat. He didn't know how to change a tire, and Arthur watched as the man spent nearly 2 hours in the hot Texas sun, on the phone, getting instructions on how to replace it. The man eventually put on the spare tire and drove to work. But by the afternoon, the spare had gone flat too, and the man had to go to an auto shop to get both tires fixed. That night, Arthur returned to the man's house and slashed 3 of the remaining tires. The old man had previously called his car insurance for help, only to be told they wouldn't assist unless all 4 tires were blown out. Arthur knew this from overhearing the man's earlier conversation, and that's why he left 1 tire untouched the first time. The next morning, the man had a complete meltdown, and he didn't show up at the restaurant for an entire month. Second act. Arthur kept an eye on the man's car. Once all the tires were replaced, he made his next move. One night, Arthur poured a mixture of sugar and bleach into the gas tank. The man's car had an older-style manual gas cover, so no one noticed anything wrong until it was too late. The next morning, Arthur watched from a distance as the man's car broke down halfway to work. The car had to be towed back to the man's house, leaving him stranded. Final act. Arthur had learned the man's name from overhearing his phone conversations. Using that information, he found the man on social media and downloaded a couple of photos of him. Then, Arthur created flyers with the man's picture, name, and a description of the unsanitary behavior he had been doing in the restaurant bathrooms for months. Arthur printed out several flyers and posted them all over the restaurant. A few days later, the man came back to the restaurant with a friend. While the friend placed their order, the man went to the bathroom, only to find the flyers plastered inside the stall. Furious, he stormed out, waving a flyer and demanding that the person responsible step forward. Arthur, grinning, stepped up and claimed responsibility. The man began shouting threats about suing for slander and emotional distress. But Arthur, with a smirk, simply repeated the man's own words. "Look, I don't care. I just wanted to ruin some poor person's day." The man's face went pale as he realized Arthur was the same employee he had casually confessed his actions to weeks earlier. The managers quickly intervened, banning the man from the restaurant. The man, enraged, threatened to ram his car into the building. Arthur, still grinning, responded, "Is your car a unicycle? You might want to check your tires." At that moment, the man understood that Arthur had been behind the vandalism of his vehicle. Humiliated and with no hard evidence against Arthur, the man backed down. He never returned to the restaurant, and no one has heard from him since. Story 5. Before I begin, I want you to take everything I say with a grain of salt. All the information I have is second-hand, and I usually don't get involved in university politics or budgeting. I'm just a student who worked part-time in the library department, and this is the story of how things unfolded over the past 2 years, culminating in what I consider one of the most professional ways of prioritizing the needs of many over the greed of a few. I'm a student at a university somewhere in Europe. The university has various departments for different fields of science, but the two main players are economics and law. These departments tend to get whatever they want, even if it means taking from others. When I was in my second year, I began working in one of the university's 4 libraries: law, economics, philosophy, languages, and math/science/political science history, and I was lucky to have a highly dedicated boss. Now, let me tell you about my boss. He was the perfect librarian, passionate about everything from library upkeep to doing research and providing various services for students. Before I joined his team, he had extended the library hours to operate from 8 a.m. until midnight, revamped the online search system, added a 3D floor plan to help students find books more easily, held regular student reviews, and developed mandatory research courses for several areas of study. He accomplished a lot, and it was all possible because he secured significant funding, with one of the biggest sponsors being an investor who graduated from the university. This dedication to building up the department is what made my boss's reaction to the economics department's decision to build an unnecessary underground section of new rooms so understandable. The project also required reconstructing an entire wing of the main building, causing the department to go vastly over budget. About 6 months after I started, the dean announced a 3 to 4 million euro deficit. As a result, other departments had to make cuts, and sponsorship money was redirected to fund the economics department's project. Within a month, our library hours were reduced to 8 p.m., and the research courses were canceled. To make matters worse, the dean informed my boss that he would have to fire several full-time staff members and assign more work to part-time students like me. Needless to say, my boss was furious. He had invested 10 years of work into securing funding and building up the library, and he wasn't about to let it all go without a fight. He started by reviewing his own budget and found that his department had been running well under budget before the cuts, which made the reductions completely unjustified. He then examined how much of the sponsorship money had actually been allocated to his department. He discovered that only about half of the sponsorship funds intended for the library had gone to his department, though this hadn't been an issue previously because he had enough resources. When the next budget review came around about a year after the cuts, my boss presented this information and proposed an audit of the newly constructed rooms. The economics department had justified the new building by claiming there weren't enough rooms to accommodate their growing student population. So, for the next 6 months, the usage of both the new and old spaces was monitored. This audit was completed last August. In the meantime, my boss started working closely with the sponsors who had supported the library. He asked them how they felt about how the university was being managed, particularly how their money was being spent. The sponsors were not pleased. Many of them, including the largest sponsor, wanted change. Although they had no direct influence on university politics, the people who provide the funding hold significant power. They approached the university and expressed their dissatisfaction. It was only then that the dean and other decision-makers realized that if they didn't make changes, the money would stop flowing, worsening the already substantial deficit. Then came the results of the audit. After 6 months of monitoring, it was clear that there had been more than enough room for students before the new construction. Not only had the economics department gone over budget, but the same number of rooms could have been created by renovating an existing building for much less. The audit also revealed that the new rooms were only available to students in the economics department, meaning they didn't benefit the university as a whole. In the end, my boss won the fight. He rehired his staff, restored the library hours until midnight, reinstated and expanded the research courses, and received a larger portion of the budget for the library. Meanwhile, the economics department lost many of its privileges. The new space was opened up to all departments, other projects were put on hold, and the economics department was informed that any future projects exceeding the set budget would have to be funded by new sponsorships. I'm sharing this story today because my boss told me this morning that he had raised enough money to renovate 3 of the 4 libraries, and, ironically, the economics library is getting a complete rebuild. Story 6. This story begins on Monday, the 13th, when I receive an email from a vice president VP who is not in charge of my department, whom I'll refer to as the problematic VP. I am informed that my team will be required to work on the 4th of July. I politely decline, explaining that our team has been scheduled this day off and people already have plans. My team is the information technology team, and as many of you know, teams often get the short end of the stick in many companies. Throughout the week, I inform my team about the situation. I let them know I have been reaching out to higher-ups to resolve it. I also assure them that if their plans are disrupted, I will make it right at work. Over the course of 3 meetings, it becomes apparent that things may not go in our favor. In response, I send an email to the Chief Executive Officer CEO of the company. All of my superiors are aware of this action and encouraged it, as the CEO is known to be family-oriented and would not allow anyone to work on a national holiday. Unfortunately, the CEO is on vacation in the Bahamas until the 6th. His assistant informs me he will review this matter upon his return. I repeatedly express my frustration. Consequently, I inform everyone that it will be a work-from-home day, and we will set my cell phone as the priority in the call routing, meaning I would receive most of the calls. To be honest, I was expecting almost no calls, especially since I was asked to send out a notification that its support would cover the 4th of July. I never sent that email out. A day later, I face another outrage. I receive an email stating that my employees would be required to be at the office, and no one was allowed to work from home. They would be checking the door badge-ins to verify our presence at the office. When I inquired about the reason via email, they claimed it was to ensure no one was playing video games at work. We normally work from home about 2/3 of the week, and video game playing is a common occurrence at work. I decided to confront the person responsible for this decision in their office. After a lengthy conversation where she was losing the logical argument, she told me, "It's just it. You guys don't have lives." I am not exaggerating. This is exactly what she said. I reported this to my VP, who responded, "I will take care of this. It likely won't be until after the 4th, so get creative." I know this man well. We have worked together for a long time, and get creative is code for corporate mischief. I asked the person requiring us to be at the office if they minded if we had an office party. They agreed, as long as it did not interfere with a call flow. They even suggested using my new company card to pay for it, saying, "Go wild." Pro tip: never tell me to go wild. At this point, it was Tuesday the 21st. I informed everyone of the situation but mentioned that I had something planned. I asked who had plans for that day. 2 people told me they were planning to set off fireworks with their families, while the rest were planning barbecues with friends. I composed an email to the VP over my department and the problematic VP. I informed them that I had notified everyone. We were all expected to work until 8 p.m. on Monday. As per the conversation with the problematic VP, I would be hosting an office party as a gesture of apology to the team members who were inconvenienced by this decision. The problematic VP replied, "Thank you for your understanding. Also, yes, I would expect an office party if I had to work on the 4th of July as well. So go wild and enjoy your time. Use your new company credit card if you need to cover a few expenses. Also, I should not have to remind you or anyone else. No fireworks or alcohol on company property." Now, let me describe our office. A while back, the IT team was relocated from the main corporate office to a smaller building by itself. It has a nice gaming break room, a decent-sized gym, and a full drink bar, non-alcoholic, of course. Out back is a large patio that crosses county lines as soon as you cross a small creek. This creek happens to have a footbridge over it, leading to an empty field. I start making phone calls. Monday, June 25th. I call everyone into a meeting an hour early that morning. I explain to them all that I will make things right. I ask everyone to invite their friends and family to the office. No supplies need to be brought by anyone. I inform them that this will be a non-alcoholic event, but that I have something planned for everyone. I tell them to expect all food to be provided, and they don't need to bring anything unless they want to bring some fireworks. In other words, they won't have to spend a dime. The 4th arrives, and we do absolutely no work the entire day. No tickets, no calls come in. Well, 7 calls do come in, but they're all from the same person, the problematic VP. She's calling to make sure we're manning the phones. All of us are playing video games or watching movies. At 6 p.m., everyone is told that the food is ready. People were expecting hot dogs, hamburgers, maybe a bratwurst or two. What they get is a full-on barbecue feast with pizza and other foods. There's smoked brisket, spare ribs, smoked sausage, smoked turkey, both kinds of potato salad, coleslaw, green beans with bacon and onion, potatoes au gratin, pizza from 2 different places, excellent hamburgers, and bratwurst hot dogs. On the dessert side, there's cake, very good cookies, 4 different kinds of pies, and about 2 pounds of fudge. Families and friends start showing up around 6 o'clock to 6:15 p.m. Some bring adult beverages, but I tell them they need to leave those in their cars as I'm not that daring. Some are not too happy about that, but agree as it's a free dinner for random strangers. So, let me set the scene for you. I'm out there with all calls routed to my cell phone, and everyone is just having a good time. We have a ton of people there enjoying the fun night, chatting about random topics, eating the food, and occasionally lighting off some sparklers or throwing firecrackers into the stream. It's not stocked and only 1 foot deep. My VP, not the problematic VP, shows up with his family and brings some water balloons for the kids and childish adults. Around 8:30 p.m., it's getting dark, and people want to set off more than the simple sparklers and firecrackers we had been using. The VP over the ET department has everyone cross the footbridge, over the county line and off company property, and we set up a big wooden board to use as our launch pad. We set off what we have for an hour or two, and then just hang out for a while. Around this time, people are tired and ready to head home. I tell people to take home leftovers, within reason. We all clock out at 8 p.m., and no one leaves until about 10:30 p.m. The problematic VP calls once more while we're out back at the party. It's 7:50 p.m., and she calls asking for a status update. My exact words are, "Well, you were the only one to call us today. The rest of us are on the back patio, enjoying the 4th of July shindig." She simply acts like my boss and says, "As long as no adult beverages or fireworks are on company property, I do not care." We eat roughly half of the catered food. The rest is taken home. A small group volunteers to stay behind to clean up, including my VP. We have a humorous conversation about how this will make waves with the bosses, but he says he has my back and asks me how much this cost. I just give him a sideways look, which makes him laugh. Tuesday morning, I submit the expense report to my VP. This email would inevitably make its way over to the problematic VP and up the chain to the Chief Information Officer CIO of the company. It would be unwise to disclose the exact cost of the party. But I can tell you that because of this 4th of July party, New rules were put into place. Any expenses of over $4,000 or more must be approved by the direct supervisor, VP over the department, and the full expense report must be sent to the financial department for review after the fact. Hint: the party cost over $6,000. The barbecue was the most expensive part. I did not order from a low or mid-tier place. The place I ordered from has consistently been on the top 10 list in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the last 30 years. I ate at that place so much I made friends with the owner. It's the best barbecue I have ever had. The pies and cakes were custom made by a bakery, and the cookies were made by a boutique cookie place. I had 10-12 packs each of Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola Zero, Dr. Pepper Zero, Pepsi, and Pepsi Zero. I bought 5 pepperoni, 5 sausage, 5 cheese, 2 Hawaiian, and 3 cheeseburger pizzas from one place, and nearly the same number from another place. Excluding the cheeseburger ones, I substituted those for a different specialty pizza from the other place. The burgers were from an excellent burger place that did catering. I know that owner well. He brought his kids for the night of fun after he heard what was going to be happening. He was also the one who brought the bratwurst hot dogs, as he recently added those to his menu. This was the most expensive office party in the history of the company. The only things more expensive than this were some business meetings where the CEO rented private rooms in high-end restaurants. As for the CEO, he was outraged. Not at the cost of the party, mind you. He knew that the party would not have been necessary if people had been allowed to go home. He was outraged that it was the only group required to work on that day. When I submitted the logs showing how we received no real phone calls, no service requests, and that we basically watched movie-played video games during our shift, he had heard enough. He apparently sent out a strongly worded email about work-life balance and the importance of our holidays to every upper management member. It was somewhat amusing as people wanted me to get in trouble for what I did. But the reality is other departments have done similar things in the past, just not on the scale that it did. The problematic VP was admonished quite effectively and sent me an apology email. I forwarded it to the team with a strong hint not to reply. Then my VP let the CIO and the CEO know about what the problematic VP said: "You guys don't have lives." The problematic VP actually confirmed she said it in a meeting with her executive vice president Eve. It did not go over well. I have never heard people yelling in an office meeting like that before. The CEO of the company came to our office and yelled at her. I'm not sure if she was fired, but she is not at work today. In Active Directory, she does not have the down arrow of termination, so I'm not 100% certain what happened to her. I know she lost whatever clout she had at this company with her attitude.